Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Nope, There's Only Trash Here podcast. This is going to be the first episode where, unfortunately it's going to be just me for this one because, I want to try and have as many guests as possible, but I also want to see how it goes if it's just me. So, yeah, have to see how this all turns out, and depending on what you guys think or how I think it kind of went, then maybe I'll do more with just me, or maybe I'll do more with other people. So before I actually get into the podcast, there's a few things that I kind of want to talk about the podcast, because I'm still, this is only episode 2 here, so this is the last episode that's going to be up on my actual channel. All the other ones are going to be uploaded on a separate YouTube channel that I've set up, which is Only Trash Here Podcast. You can find the link in the description. So for all future podcast episodes, please go over and subscribe to that. And that's where they're all going to be posted. Actually, I think that's about it. So I guess I should get into the podcast itself. So once again, the structure is going to be similar to what it was last week, where the first half is going to be talking about current gaming stuff, and then the second half will be one specific topic something that I thought that I kind of wanted to talk about. So news-wise, there hasn't really been that much this week. It hasn't been dead. It's just, there's been it's March, so we're kind of waiting for all the games to come out, because March is usually quite a busy gaming time. If a game doesn't come out in the holiday season, it's usually around March. So really, it's just, there's a lot of games coming out, but there's really not that much news happening, because that kind of starts kicking off in April and all that. So the only piece of news that I kind of want to talk about, there have been a lot of little things, but the main thing I want to talk about is Timesplitters Rewind. Now, a bit of history, in case you don't know, about a year or so ago, the head of Crytek asked the fans, do they want a new Timesplitters game? Now, the reason why Crytek asked it, because the first 3 Timesplitters games were made by studios called Free Radical, who are based in the UK, but they made a game called Haze on the PS3 that was a big bust, so they went out of business. Now, the way that they're still around is that Crytek brought them up and made them into Crytek UK. So now Crytek own them, so they kind of asked, do people want a new Timesplitters? Because Timesplitters wasn't a massive series. It was it did well, but it wasn't a massive one. It was critically acclaimed and people liked it, but it wasn't one of the big franchises. And because of, Free Radical going out of business, they couldn't really, they couldn't do another one. So now it's all in Crytek's hand. The response from fans was not as much as you kind of wanted to see. There was an online petition which I believe got like 75,000 signatures. One of them was me, because of course I really want to see a new Timesplitters game. But yeah, pretty much what this has resulted to is that Crytek went back and was like, okay, so 75,000, that's a decent number, but not enough to actually make a full retail new Timesplitters game, or Timesplitters 4. I guess that's the decision they came to. So instead, some sort of compromise has come out of all this, is that Crytek has authorized a Timesplitters game to be made, but not by them. They're assembling a team of, a lot of them are fans, but some of them are original Timesplitters staff, and they're all going to come together to make this new game called Timesplitters Rewind. Now, at the moment, there isn't a lot of details from it, but it's actually going to be, it's going to be similar to Sonic Generations, as in everything's going to be in HD, and it's going to have the multiplayer modes and some of the challenges, and it's going to combine stuff from all 3. And also, I'm looking up here, there's going to be 8 to 16 players online, and bots are going to be in it. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out here, and there's going to be a demo for it in December. So it's really cool that something is actually happening with Timesplitters. It's been a while. Timesplitters was such a great franchise, but honestly, I think Timesplitters just won't translate in the same way that it did back in the day. And definitely this Timesplitters Rewind idea, it's a cool idea, but I don't think it's going to translate to nowadays, because the biggest appeal of Timesplitters and what made it a really great franchise was the multiplayer. Well, it was the humour and the multiplayer, but you stuck around for the multiplayer. I remember when Timesplitters 2 was out, and then when Timesplitters 3 was out, I play those games multiplayer for hours with friends, you know, just go to a mate's house after school and just play it for hours, just messing around with the map maker, all the different characters, all the awesome modes. But the thing is, it's a split screen multiplayer game. That was where the strength was. That's what separated it. That the split screen multiplayer was so good. There, you know, during the PS2 days, the split screen multiplayer was still around, but as soon as it hit the 360, it kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Split screen multiplayer. I'm not saying nobody plays split screen multiplayer games anymore, but it's definitely not as big. It's all about online. So I believe this new one, being on the PC only, is kind of focusing on online multiplayer. From what I can see, there is no split screen because it's on PC. So while it's pretty cool that this game is being made, I won't be playing it. I don't think it will really work. It'd be nice to see it all come in again, but the fact that it's being made by fans and it's an official game, it's just not being made by an official developer. It's just a team of people who came together to make this thing. And I mean, it's going to be really nice to see it all again, but I don't think anything is really going to come of this. I think it's going to come and go, and the only way that this Timesplitters Rewind is going to get any sort of success is if they go like the Team Fortress 2 route. If they kind of, you know, have it in that kind of style. Because now you can't just, with the thing with online multiplayer, you can't have it as simple as split screen, because the appeal of split screen is that you're there in a room with friends and you're having a laugh and it's a good time. But with online, you don't have that. So the way that online shooters kind of compensate for that is that you add more depth to the actual gameplay. So the online has its own depth to it. Because split screen multiplayer doesn't have depth, but it doesn't matter because you're just messing around with friends. But if you're just sitting there alone in your room playing an online game, you need something to keep you playing it. So that's why, you know, there's all this new depth that comes to the online multiplayer, where back in split screen it was just like, select a city character, play as Duckman Drake, you know, things like that. So, you know, I'm interested to see it, but again, another problem that I have with it is that it's only on the PC. I mean, I would have really liked to have seen it come to Xbox Live and, you know, PSN. I don't know if that's going to happen eventually, but I think part of the reason why it's not happening is because of the new generation. I mean, that would be my guess, that these games are only coming to PC because it's easy to develop for the PC and just the PC, and porting games, you need a lot of money behind that. So, I mean, I would like, and with the new generation coming on, they would then have to be using all those development kits, because the demo for the thing comes out in December, and by that point, obviously the Wii U's already out, and the new Xbox and the PS4 is going to be out. So, you know, it'll be redundant if they release the game on the old console, but then again, not releasing the game, only having it on PC, you really are going up against Team Fortress 2, and I'm just not going to get round to playing it, I'm afraid. So yeah, hopefully this leads on to something more, to an official Timesplitters 4, but you know, we'll have to see how the demo goes, really. So that's it for kind of news. I'm going to talk about some games that I've kind of been playing, because like I said, a lot of games have been coming out. It's been, you know, a pretty exciting time. You know, as end of generations go, this one is, you know, looking pretty good. There's still some big games coming out. So one game that I've recently been playing is Far Cry 3. Now, I know that came out last year, but it's a game that looks really good because I really do like open world games. Or I like this generation of open world games. I don't really like GTA because I don't really like open world games where you create your own fun, but I do admittedly like the grind section of open world games, you know. Like, I really liked Assassin's Creed 1, Spider-Man 2, Red Dead Redemption was a great one. Open world games are really good, and this generation they figured them out. So with Far Cry 1 I didn't pick it up because it was a PC game mostly. Far Cry 2 I didn't pick up because of the bad reviews. But then Far Cry 3 seems like, you know, it's actually a decent game. It got a lot of good reviews. It's kind of cheap already due to just how many games have come out recently, so I thought I'd pick it up, and I have to say, I don't really like it. I'm not going to go into my full thoughts about it because me and Proto Mario are going to do a co-review of the thing, so look out for that some point next week on Proto Mario's channel. But yeah, I just don't really like it. There's something really off about it because it has all the elements of a good open world game. You know, one large open world, the way everything's structured, it all makes sense. Like, you have your upgrades, but the way you upgrade stuff is that you go hunting. And then, you know, so as you're exploring the open world, you're finding stuff to kind of upgrade yourself. But you start off so limited, and you can only hold one weapon, you can hold hardly any money. I don't get that. For some reason they limit your money, which doesn't make any sense. You can only hold a certain amount of money unless you upgrade your wallet. But while that's a nice idea, it's completely pointless, and the money is pretty much completely pointless. Again, I need to play it more, and this is more of initial impressions, but I have to say, if you really like the other Far Cry games, then sure, go for it, but I don't really like it. You know, the setting is kind of bland, and also, I think it's really important when it comes to open world games. What you have to set it up right. You have to put, you know, when you throw somebody into an open world game, you have to kind of try and give someone the reason, or the person playing a reason to care, and a reason to actually go and do all this stuff overall. Obviously the most basic way to do that is the story. And while Far Cry 3 does have a good story, like the first half an hour is all story setup, and that's really cool. They really do a good job, but then after that they just throw you in. And then you just kind of start grinding, and it's just, I don't know, it's kind of off. I mean, that moment where they throw you in, there's a reason with Rockstar games they hold your hand for so long at the beginning. Like with Red Dead Redemption, you just spend so much time just messing around on the farm and not really doing that much. There's a reason, because they're all building it up to the point where they open up the world to you, and then you're like, awesome, you know, I can explore this big world and do all this cool stuff. You know, it's a gradual thing. And I think Far Cry 3 has this cool half an hour, and then they just throw you in, and the setting's very generic. It's just one big island. So, I don't know. It has all the elements that I like in an open world game. But it seems like, I don't want to be mean, but like there's no talent behind it. It's like, it feels like it was made by people who are fan of open world games, but can't make them. So it has all the elements in there, but they can't actually, it's an experience that just doesn't come together pretty much, you know. But yeah, I will talk more about Far Cry 3 in my review. So another game that came out recently that my review went up last Saturday was Tomb Raider. Now this is kind of an interesting game because the review was kind of short, so I do want to, you know, embellish on some of my points. That initially, you know, in the review I said that I'm not a big fan of the Tomb Raider games, and part of that is my fault because I only played Tomb Raider 2 and 3, but I played them on the PC, so they were just like, they controlled horribly, and I was quite young when I played them, and it was just a mess. Like, I just couldn't figure out those games. They were so hard to play, controls were horrible, and I didn't really get along with it. So maybe if I had played the PlayStation 1 versions, I would have liked Tomb Raider. But as it stands, going into this new reboot, I just didn't know anything, or I did know stuff about the series, but as far as I could tell, it just wasn't very good. And I can't imagine the Tomb Raider games now have aged well, you know, like if you go back and play Tomb Raider 1, I can't imagine that game has aged well. And a lot of the more recent ones have got horrible reviews, but so yeah, it's just a franchise I don't really like. And also I don't really like how in Tomb Raider half the puzzle is you have to figure out what ledges you can and cannot climb on. Like, that's so silly. That's like a really silly approach. So going into the new Tomb Raider, I was, you know, I got it because it got good reviews, and it is awesome. It really is a really great game, and I'm going to talk a bit more about it later on. But it's a game that is just really enjoyable. It's one of those games where it's more of an experience, but I think a lot of people probably won't like it because it's one of these action games where a lot of action kind of happens in it. And I know for some reason people don't like that, you know. The biggest source is the Call of Duty. People are like, hey, oh, awesome, look at all this action in this game. And then it's like, yeah, it's an action game. So I think Tomb Raider has a lot of that, like a lot of Like, you know, you're in this place, and then you know, a fire breaks out, and then Lara Croft is like, I better leave, and then everything's just collapsing. It's kind of hilarious just how like, she goes through so much in that game. She has such a horrible time. Like, it's kind of unreal. It's just, yeah, it's like so much horrible stuff. But I do want to make one kind of weird point about that game, is that, okay, I'm not spoiling anything here, but at the beginning of the game, when Lara arrives on the island, she falls onto a spike that goes straight through her side. Like, straight through. And then one of the first QuickTime events or button things that you have to kind of press X a lot to rip yourself up. Which is cool, you know, it's a nice idea. It actually is quite well done. And then she's just, that's it. She, like, rips herself out and, like, is fine. Well, she's obviously not fine. She starts limping all over the place. But for the rest of the game, it's not addressed. She never, you know, takes care of the wound. She just has a hole in her side the whole game. And then it's quite funny, because then they kind of go back to it later on, where you're kind of going along, and then Lara makes a jump and kind of gets a bit injured again, and then she holds her side where she got stabbed like a few hours ago. It's just like, wouldn't you be dead by this point? You have a hole in you that you've just ignored for a while. I'm assuming that it didn't puncture any organs or many major organ, and that's why it's fine. But still, it's right through her gut. It's not in the middle, it's on the side, but still, it's pretty bad. You know, she really is a survivor. The amount of stuff she goes through, the amount of beatings she takes. Like, I think there's one part where she gets, like, punched to the face a few times, and I was like, Jesus, just, guys, you've got her, because they capture her at some point, and it's like, you got her, it's fine, you don't have to punch her in the face, we get it, you win. Because, yeah, I mean, that game, it is really good, though. And I think what defines it is that it's very smooth to play, very natural, everything you kind of do. There's no real stopping points in that game. You just keep playing it, and everything just comes together, and it's pretty cool. And the story as well, but again, I kind of mentioned this in the review, so I won't go on about it, but with stories, when there's a story where there's like a mystery, you better have a good, like, reveal. Because when you first arrive on the island, a lot of crazy stuff happens, and it's all kind of cool. And you're like, "Whoa, what's going? Oh, gee, oh, okay." There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and you don't know what's happening. And then when they reveal what's happening, it's just like, "Oh, it's some mystical kind of stuff going on." There's this guy, he's kind of a cranky guy, I guess. And then that's kind of it. So, you know, I kind of, you know, when they reveal it, it's a bit disappointing. But still, absolutely, I say play it. It's a really great game, a game I didn't expect to like as much as I did, but it's one of my favourite 360 games, I have to say, probably in my top 5, you know. I'm not too sure exactly what would be in that top 5, I know Fallout 3 and Mass Effect 2 would be in there, but I don't know what else, but yeah, definitely check that out. So another game that is coming out soon that I want to quickly touch on is Lego City Undercover. Now, the reason why I said it's coming out soon for all you American people out there is because it came out on the 18th of March in America, but it's coming out, I think, on the 28th, or it's coming out next week in Europe. And the Lego City Undercover, it does look really good. I actually do want to play it. Now, in case you haven't seen my Lego Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars review, I'm out of the Lego games. I'm completely out. I don't care. I don't like them anymore. I don't want to play them. Because the first game was such a great game. It was just a really surprising game. I mean, maybe great is too much of, you know, too big of a word, but it was a surprisingly fun game. And the idea of a game version of Lego of Star Wars was like, it's one of those bizarre ideas where you're like, no, that won't work. And then they made the game. It's like, this absolutely works, and this game is awesome. I really like this game. But then they really did lose their way, like with the other games. I've played. I have two mates, or I have two friends who are engaged, and you know, the guy plays a lot of games, but the girl doesn't, because that's how people work. And they do play the Lego games together, all of them. They played all of them. They get really excited. When Lego Lord of the Rings came out, they were like, yeah, awesome, and then they brought it and played it together, and they loved those games. So I have played Lego Pirates, and I played Lego Harry Potter, and those games are just, I had the same problem with those games as I did Lego Star Wars 3. They're confusing. They're just really kind of confusing games. Like, if you're going to have a game that focuses on those games should focus on simplicity, not be like as complicated as they are, because they're not complex games, but the puzzles have no kind of nice flow to them. There's no easy logic. The games don't have to be patronizingly easy, but these games and the puzzles and the way the world is constructed and getting 100%, it's just a pain. It's not enjoyable. I just didn't have a good time playing the last 3 Lego games I played. But the reason why I'm interested in Lego City Undercover is because it's not being made by Traveller's Traveller's Tales. Now, they've made all the other ones, but because this is a side project and because they make 2 of these games a year, they actually outsourced it to someone else. I can't quite remember the name of the company. I'm going to quickly look it up here. But yeah, so because it's not being made by them, I think maybe the logic of the puzzles is better. Maybe it's actually enjoyable. Because, with the other games, it's just not enjoyable to figure out puzzles. It's just really annoying. Like, you spend ages just banging your head against the wall, it feels like, and then you eventually figure it out. TT Fusion, apparently, which, TT, I'm assuming, stands for that. And, oh no, TT Fusion did make it. Oh, shoot. Okay, let's cancel that game. Let's not buy that one anymore. Oh god, I didn't realise they did. That's a big letdown. Although it seems like here they... Okay, I should stop reading the Wikipedia. So yeah, they did make it, but it's different. I'm still kind of interested in it, and it is different. But I can't... It's one of these things where with reviews, I can't judge whether this game is good, because even though it has got 80 on Metacritic, I don't know if anyone else has this, but when you read reviews about a game, there's a lot of times where it's just like, okay, can I trust these reviews? Because a lot of times there'll be games out there where I have a certain problem with the game, but no reviews mention that problem, because it's not like a technical kind of problem. And I don't think there are many reviews out there that attack the Lego games in the same way that I do, where I say that the puzzles and playing it is really frustrating and annoying and just has no flow to it. There's not many reviews out there that say that about these games. I remember when I posted my Lego Star Wars 3 Clone Wars review, which you can check out. It's not very good, but you can check out the review. And some people were saying that about the game, but overall, I had to seek out YouTube reviews to really get the truth about whether this game was good or not, or just to get someone that agreed with me. So, with this game, it's got good reviews, and 80 is really good on Metacritic, and of course, a game called Lego City Undercover is never going to get that high reviews anyway, so this is pretty much as I could expect. So I don't know if it's going to be good, because I don't know if anyone's going to say, oh, by the way, the puzzles in this game are a lot better than they were in the other ones. But what makes me kind of think that they are is because it's an open world game, which is pretty interesting. It's one big open world. It's the Lego parody of GTA, and that's pretty interesting. I think that concept alone is a pretty good one, and I like the idea of a game that kind of uses the 80s cop kind of thing, and apparently the writing in it is pretty good and funny. So yeah, it's something that is definitely on my... I might not get it, but I'm very interested in it, that's for sure. I'll have to wait till it goes down. Because of course another reason to be interested in it is because of the Wii U and what's going on with that. Last week me and my brother took a look at the Wii U, and it's 2013, but one thing we've kind of failed to mention is that the first 2 months, January and February, terrible, absolutely terrible. The Wii U it had a pretty good start, a pretty decent start. Some people would be like, no, it had a horrible launch. No, it actually had a good launch. Not an amazing launch like the Wii, but it did do good. There was a good lineup of games, it sold pretty well. But then when it hit 2013, in the first 2 months, it just did terribly. And the main reason is because there were no games for it. For all of January and all of February, no games on the Wii U. The only one I played was The Cave, and that was a multi-platform game and wasn't that great. Not horrible, just nothing special. So, you know, if you go on Nintendo eShop, you can see it's like, oh, there's nothing new here. Well, you know, it's still got New Super Mario Bros. U that came out November. So that's kind of embarrassing. So Lego City Undercover is like the first big Wii U game to come out in a while. I don't think there were any in December. So obviously I kind of want to look at this game because I want to play on my Wii U. Because it's the case where, you know, whether or not you say the Wii U is a bad console, I say it's a good console, but when it comes to good or bad console, it comes down to the games. And with the Wii U, you know, the sales for the Wii U have been embarrassingly bad. But that's because there's no games. No one's going to buy this new console because there's no games for the thing. So, yeah, hopefully with Lego City Undercover, there's also Monster Hunter 3 Ultimates, which, I am not playing that. No way am I playing that game. I played Monster Hunter 3 Try, the original on the Wii, played it for an hour and then sold it because it was one of those things where it was kind of a bit of a mess. You know, to briefly go into the reasons why I don't like that game. The controls were horrible. It's one of those things where it's basic game design. If I aim in one direction and press the attack button, I want to attack in that direction. But in Monster Hunter 3 Try, what you have to do, you have to aim yourself and then hit the attack button. It's horrendously clunky. Like, the controls were terrible, the graphics were awful, the areas were split into such small areas that you were constantly going through loading screens just to get anywhere. And yeah, so, I mean, with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, it seems like they fixed some of the problems, but I really doubt it. Because again, I come back to the whole, nobody saw the same problems that I did with Monster Hunter 3 Try, and I think the media kind of gave Monster Hunter 3 Try a free pass because it's a big Japanese franchise, and, you know, I think they kind of gave it a bit of a free pass. When I played that game, I just saw all this mess. You know, maybe it does get really good the more you play, but if I play for an hour and all these flaws just scream out at me, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not kind of gonna keep playing it really. So what else is kind of coming out? We also got the Gears of War Judgment, which, again, it's got good reviews, but it's another Gears of War game. You know what I mean? You know exactly what you're gonna get when you go pick up Gears of War Judgment. So, oh, it's more Gears of War, and that's about it. And that's not bad, but it's not good either, because I'll be honest, I don't have much money at the moment. I kind of have to pick and choose exactly what games I'm going to buy. So I can't turn around and be like, oh, I'm going to get Gears of War Judgment, because even though it's good, it's nothing that interesting. You know, Lego City Undercover probably is a worse game, but at least that kind of it's kind of interesting. It's a game that I would like to check out just because of how different it is, but Gears of War Judgment is just another Gears of War, so yeah, I mean, I guess I should also mention some of the games that I kind of miss, because that's the problem. When you start a podcast, you have to start at some moment in time, and, you know, people are still going to be talking about, or a lot of games are still going to be fresh in people's mind, but of course I wasn't recording a podcast a month ago, so I couldn't talk about other games. So yeah, Dead Space 3 is a game that I don't want. Is this a bit self-indulgent? I'm just going through a list of games that have come out and being like, no, yeah, I guess, no, yeah. But yeah, so there was Alien Colonial Marines, that was terrible. I want to be covered, you know, so for the next podcast I don't have to go back. Crisis 3 I haven't played, but it looks decent. Again, it's like Gears of War. Good reviews, it looks pretty good, but it's just another Crisis game. Crisis 2 wasn't anything special, so I don't really feel like I need to rush out and buy the new Crisis game. Yeah, actually, I think that's kind of about it. There's some stuff coming out on the 3DS, but I think I will talk about that a bit more next week. So, yeah, with that, that's news and current games. So, let's get on to the topic of discussion. Now, you know, because I'm kind of starting this off, I actually kind of had a lot of ideas about exactly what to talk about. But my plan is that when I get more people on, then I can talk to them about something they're kind of or something they kind of care about more in gaming. So I kind of had to come up with something that I personally could just rant about or talk about. So what I'm going to talk about, I've got it written down here, is about the old school challenge and also about the current day kind of challenge in video games. Now, the reason why I kind of got inspired to do this was two reasons. The first one is this discussion I had. Discussion is kind of a generous term, with people on the Game Grumps comments. Now, recently they did a series in Castlevania, I guess, And yeah, and it kind of came up about the old school kind of challenge, and John in the video mentioned about how he found Call of Duty very annoying. So I left a comment saying I think there is something to these new games, and they are very similar. And then of course it came to a whole thing where some people attacked me for my comment, some people said, hey, this guy's alright, some people, somebody tried to be philosophical, it all kind of got a bit silly, but again, it did get me kind of thinking about it. And the second one is Tomb Raider, because Tomb Raider is one of those games where it's kind of what gaming has been gearing towards since 3D graphics pretty much came around, since early PS2 times, I'm gonna say, where because here's the thing, and I think here's what a lot of this comes down to when it comes to comparing new games that are out now to older games, is that older games are a video game. You're meant to sit down as a challenge. They had a lot of stuff that was based from the arcades, because that's the problem. Gaming came from arcades originally. You'll go to an arcade machine, and the whole point was that it was very challenging because you're ultimately meant to lose. You're not supposed to beat it without putting in a ton of money, so it was all about the challenge, it was all about the high score, and that's what gaming focused on. But as gaming became more and more technically advanced and graphics got better, it then got to this point where gaming, it didn't become about that anymore. Very slowly throughout the last 20 years it stopped becoming about that, and it became more about an experience. It's gaming today, if you want to ask, are games easier today than they were back then, and I'm not talking about just arcade, I'm talking about NES and all that kind of stuff, and honestly it's no. The answer is no. But what it is that gaming nowadays, it's aiming towards a streamlined experience where you're not held back, where the whole thing is that you're supposed to be absorbed into the game, where you're not even thinking that you're playing the game. Obviously you are, but the game isn't trying to make you aware that you're playing a video game. It's more your experience, what the game is throwing at you. Kind of like with films, you're not supposed to be sitting down and thinking, I'm watching a film. You're supposed to be sitting down and experiencing the film, the story, the characters, the colours, the acting. And that's what gaming is aiming towards. It's trying to be more like film, and this is something that a lot of people have said, but it really is true. But the thing is, and the reason why I would say no, games aren't easier nowadays, is because, well, first of all, games are longer. So when you look back on older games, a big example of a challenging old game that people talk about, or an older series of games, are the Mega Man games. Now, if you look at those Mega Man games, they're all less than 2 hours long. You can beat them in an hour quite easily. And that's the thing, that's the right length for that sort of game. And because of that game length, you can have that challenge. A game that's an hour long, you can have that challenge. It's an endurance kind of thing. Gaming back then was all about endurance due to the fact that it was based off the old arcade design, where you were supposed to see how far you can get and see if you can beat it. See if you can sit there and actually beat it, actually put in the time and the effort to beat it. But saying nowadays, the average length of a game, it used to be about 8 hours. I think it's now more like 6. Imagine if a Mega Man game was 6 hours long. You wouldn't beat it. You would just... Okay, people would beat it, but it wouldn't be that fun. You would just sit there, you just come to one area, keep trying, and then you would just die, and then try, then you would eventually do it. And then you'd be 4 hours into the thing, and it's like, I'm just what? Because that's the thing. That's the brilliance of the design of the games back then, like Mega Man, Castlevania, things like that. Is that they're as long as they can, you can beat them really quickly, but they're as long as you are good at the game. So if you're bad at the game and you don't kind of adapt to it, and you get frustrated, then the game lasts hours and hours and hours. But there isn't that much content there. So that was kind of the brilliant thing about those sort of games, and that's why people didn't feel conned when they took home this game like Mega Man, and they sat down, they tried to beat it, and they couldn't. But then you can beat those games in an hour or less, but because you have to figure out the game to be able to do that. So there is a satisfaction in doing that. Now, of course, I can't argue that that is still present in gaming today. There's not many games where you can beat it a lot quicker just because you know the game. You know, there's always going to be some sort of set time. You know, that's kind of obvious. When you look at speedruns of old NES games, they're really quick. But then you look at a speedrun of, say, the latest Zelda games, they're a lot longer because there's no shortcuts in games anymore. You know, Super Metroid was kind of the big one where the whole point is that if you learned about the game, then you could figure out shortcuts to beat the game quicker. Did that make the game hard or easy? Well, I don't think so. But I think that is the ultimate definition of the old school challenge, where a game can last 8 hours, but you beat the game and then you're smart, then you figure it out enough so you can beat it quicker. And that's why, you know, people let's play games showing that they can do that, and that's why they get some enjoyment from playing those old games. Now, new games, due to their length and the fact that they're going for an experience, can't do that. You're always going to hit a certain amount of time to play the game. But really, that's just the gaming environment we are in today. I don't think it makes the game really easier, because one thing that people kind of forget is that difficulty settings exist. But because the standard difficulty setting is easier than what the standard difficulty was back then, back with older games, people think that games are now easier. They're really not. If you play a lot of games, and most games have difficulty settings, if you crank it up to hard, then you will have a hard time. But because they want you to experience the game, they want you to enjoy the graphics, they want you to enjoy the gameplay, and just how much there is to a game, then because of how much there is in the game, can't design levels as pinpoint precise as they could back in the day, but they can still make it hard. You can still have a hard time doing it. Now, my point that I kind of left in the Game Grumps comments, and what I kind of got into an argument about, is that I think, now, you know, you got to stick with me here, that the Call of Duty does have like an old school gaming sort of challenge aspect to it, because part of the old school challenge or old school gaming is learning the game and kind of understanding it better by playing it for hours. Now, if you play Call of Duty on Veteran and try to beat that, if you don't let frustration get the better of you, you will go through that same experience. I know I did when I was playing those games through on Veteran. You will go through that same experience of trying to understand each part of the level, trying to get through. But because gaming isn't like that anymore, it's more frustrating and you just don't want to do it. With older NES games, people were either a kid when they played it, so put up with the frustration of understanding the game, because there's always going to be annoyance when it comes to that. Because when you try and beat a game with how a lot of games are designed, or their normal difficulty, you kind of expect to be able to just just do it, and if you're good at games in general, you can do it, rather than being good at that specific game. So, but you kind of excuse older games because they're expected to be hard and frustrating. But with newer games, when you're just burning through an 8-hour campaign and then boom, move on to the next AAA title, and then beat that in 8 hours, and then boom, move on to the next one, play some online multiplayer. When you come to a game where you have to stop and really play it, then people don't do it. People refuse to do it. And I think that's kind of the problem I have when people are so uppity and up in arms about, oh, what games were harder back then. It's like, no, games are hard now. You just don't play them. You just play it on normal. If you really want a hard game, a challenging game, then put it on hard and see what happens. You will have to learn the game. There will be memorization. It's just not the focus of gaming anymore. And if you don't like that, then I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, some people just don't like that. That's not the focus anymore, and that's really just an older gamer thing. Now, one thing I want to mention is that people started saying that games became easier during the PS2 days. Now, that was like such a weird time, because it's when gaming was becoming more of an experience, so was less focused on difficulty. Because old N64 and PS1 games were kind of you were still blatantly playing a video game. They weren't trying to trick you into thinking or trying to make you experience the game. You were still blatantly playing the video game, so it's still hard. But then, like, a weird thing happened is that during the PS2 times, people were like, well, we want these long games, So, you know, if it's under 6 hours, we're going to complain about it. Suddenly, this was kind of a sudden thing due to just how much content, well, a lot of it was how much content got put into the PS1 and N64 days. I can't even imagine being a kid back then, playing a SNES game, only having that be like, playing Super Mario World, being able to beat that in a couple of hours or so, 2-3 hours. And then you go to Super Mario 64 and it's a lot longer. But, I think if you want to know if games are easier, all you have to do is look at just the Nintendo games. And it's not a perfect God, I can't speak. It's not a perfect represent. Oh God, I really can't speak. This is embarrassing. For someone, I'm trying to do a podcast and I can't talk. It doesn't perfectly show the transition in games, but if you look at just the Nintendo games, main Nintendo franchises, mind you, they have not got easier or harder. If anything, they've gotten harder. Now, which game is easier, alright? Honestly, you sitting there, which game is easier between Super Mario Bros. 3, one of the, most beloved games of all time, I personally love it, and Super Mario 64? Now, I'm sure a lot of people, I don't know exactly how everyone would answer that question. And, okay, here's another example, alright? Which one's harder? Super Mario Bros. 3, again, and Super Mario Sunshine. Because games are as hard as they are. I could look at gaming today and pick games that are, really hard. And probably up there with old classics like Ninja Gaiden. You can pick out those games, but due to the fact that the difficulty is not the norm, I think people confuse that to games are getting easier. Games are getting more frequent. There's so many games you can play with Xbox Live, PSN. You got the Wii U, the Wii, the 360. The industry now is just it's a billion pound or dollar industry. It's really big, so you can get whatever you want out of gaming. And you can get a good story out of a game if you want. You can get that hard challenge of the game. But I think it's kind of a bit of laziness on other people's part. Because everyone now, when they play a game, they want their hand to be held in a certain way. And I think even the people who like the older games would kind of admit, I think they're kind of in that same boat. Or they've let themselves... they've let themselves become like that. So, looking at the Nintendo games, Super Mario Galaxy, it's a lot more fluid experience, but, to go back to one of my original points, Super Mario Bros. 3, you can beat that in a couple of hours or so. Super Mario Galaxy, to get to the end of that game, even if you're looking at just defeating Bowser, you're thinking 10 hours. I would say it's maybe not that many, maybe 6 to 8 hours, but to get 100% in that game, because that's also the interesting thing about games nowadays. The games that people talk about when they mention the old school kind of challenge are not games that you would 100%. They're just games all you had to do was beat them. So I think that's kind of it's both a bad and good thing about new games, is that, if you want to just get to the end, then that's fine, but if you want a real challenge, go for 100%. It's something that I both like, because sometimes when I play a game, I do just want to experience it and get to the end of it. I do want to just beat it, But then sometimes I do want that extra challenge. The problem with with this system of having 100% collection thing is that, a lot of the time it's just collecting. You just kind of have to go out your way to do stuff. This is the point that I kind of talk about in my review on my main channel that goes up on this Saturday. It's a game where it's designed like that. It's a Nintendo game, and I think Nintendo are the biggest advocates of this, although most gaming kind of now has it, where the challenge is A, beating the game on hard, and C, or B, getting 100% of the items. I really do like collecting in games, and I got 100% in Just Cause 2. Of course that was a massive grind fest, but the thing is, that wasn't hard, that wasn't challenging. But I think that is the way that a lot of game developers do that, and I kind of wish that they didn't. If I'm being honest, I think it doesn't suit every single game. It's kind of annoying that I was playing through Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, a great game, but there was a load of collectibles, and it's just like, no, this isn't hard. It's just looking up a strategy guide, and that's the thing. I think it's another interesting point about gaming today, is that you can just look it up online. Now, is that fair to judge games because everyone can just look it up online? No. But honestly, I think what it does mean is that the older games, what's interesting about them, and one thing that really shines about the older games that were challenging, is that a strategy guide would not help. Apart from the figuring things out, like say with Mega Man, you have to figure out who to take on, what's the proper order, who's weak against who. Outside of that, if you had a strategy guide for Mega Man, you would not do that much better. You would still kind of suck at the game unless you kind of played it and, learnt it, or just had good reflexes. So I think that's kind of interesting, and I can't really think of many examples or nowadays where that is the case. So, I mean, you've got me there, people who disagree with me. There's not that many examples that are strategy game proof, but I think that's the real way to know if a game is that sort of old school challenge. I'm really sorry, I keep saying old school challenge a lot, but that's what that's the topic here, so that's kind of what I'm going back to all the time. I think that's the test, and honestly, I want to, do you guys think there are any games that, are above that test? The test being, if you look up a strategy guide for it, how much better will you actually do? Because you can learn about a game by looking it up and seeing, but will that really, is that really, how much are you gonna benefit from that? I mean, one thing I'm kind of happy is that a lot with the old school challenge, sorry, saying that again, is that a lot of the elements are going in games, which I love. I hate game overs. I don't get them. They don't make any sense. And luckily, game overs are going, because a game over breaks the gaming experience. You get sucked out of the game. You're suddenly when you have a life counter and you get game over, you're so aware you're playing a video game. And of course, that isn't a problem. When I'm saying this, I'm not saying that I don't think designers see it as a problem. It's just not what they want in their game. They don't want you to be aware. So yeah, with game overs, I'm kind of happy to have this trade-off where the old school experience has been kind of doled down, where the norm isn't to just learn a game and memorize it, because it means I can just enjoy games. I play games to enjoy them. And yes, there is an enjoyment to that challenge, but there's not an enjoyment to repeating the same thing over and over and over again. There's a satisfaction, but yeah, at what cost? It's kind of like if you kept poking yourself in the eye like 20 times. There's a satisfaction and a good feeling when you stop poking your bloody eye, but was it worth it? So, I mean, it's definitely a trade-off, the fact that game overs, lives and continues are going, because now you're going to beat a game. Games are designed to be beaten, but back then games were designed not to be beaten, and there was this weird crossover period going from arcade to video games, where some games were designed to be beaten, some games weren't, some games were designed to be beaten quickly, some games weren't, but nowadays games are designed to be beaten. And that, honestly, I mean, to finish this whole thing off, that is the way it should be. Games should be made so you actually beat them, so you actually see everything in the game. Now, of course, when I was a kid, there really was a great feeling to finding a new part of the game. Super Mario 64 is a big part of that, where every time you found a new painting, it's like, whoa, I found this new part of the game? But honestly, a lot of that is just you being a kid. And I think that's something a lot of people need to kind of realise and think about. It's like, okay, how much of this is actually a good positive thing, and how much of this frustration and playing this game so much is me just, having nostalgia for this game. And even if games went back to how they were designed back then, you're not going to recapture that same kind of thing, that same kind of deal where you're like, oh wow, I found this new part of the game, that's amazing. And I know what people are talking about, because with games nowadays you constantly are finding new parts of the game. But, I mean, I don't know. I think that's the way it should be. So with that, I guess that's the end of episode 2. Yeah, sorry that this is a bit, shorter than the other ones. But, being by myself, it's kind of a bit hard. I don't want to keep talking here forever, And also, there wasn't that much news this week. Maybe I should have came up with something, talked about, Nintendo got sued. That's kind of crazy. It's kind of a small case, and then EA CEO resigned as well. I guess I could have talked about that, but oh well, it's done now. I finished the podcast, so what are you going to do? So once again, go over to the channel Only Trash Here podcast to hear new episodes of the podcast. If you are watching this or listening to this on the actual channel, then awesome. I thank you very much. And also, don't forget, if you wanted to download the MP3 of this episode, it's a bit late, really, to be me mentioning the MP3 of the episode. But, whatever. What are you going to do, really? But, it's all good in the hood, as I always like to say. Yeah, it is in the description, and it will be in the description of every episode. So if you want, you don't have to watch the video. You just download the MP3 and away you go. Because I think, this is meant to be audio. I kind of talked about this a bit last week, but this is an audio show. It's a podcast, and it's not supposed to be a visual element to it. And I know people do enjoy a visual element, but I'm not going to slap my ugly face to it because there's no need for it. Although you can see all my erratic hand movements when I talk. When I get into something, I just go like with my hand. Obviously you can't see my hands, but I go all over the place with my hands. So on that kind of a bit weird note, and my voice is kind of going once again. It's kind of early in the morning. It's 1:45. I just had lunch, so yeah. So I'm going to go back, probably play some Far Cry 3, something like that. So yeah, don't forget to tune in next week, and I will see you then.